Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm your host, Conor O'Neill, joined today by Joe Thomas, Chris Beesley, and Matt Jones. A full house as we pay tribute to Bill Kenwright following his south passing on Monday night. Look ahead to Sunday's game against West Ham United, and look at the big news of today, which is Doucoure appears to be closing in on signing a new contract at Everton. Joe, you didn't join myself and Chris the other day. You were off when we paid tribute to Bill Kenwright in a special Royal Blue podcast. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as the Everton's Echo correspondent and someone who's covered the city of Liverpool on a wider scale in various roles across the Echo, he was a man who touched the hearts of many. And obviously, you will have known from your time as covering Hillsborough, how close an affinity he had to a lot of the families there.
Yeah, it's obviously very sad news. And I think you're right there that when people thinking about Bill Kenwright and his legacy, obviously the natural tendency is for Everton fans to view it through the prism of Everton Football Club. But really, I think his legacy has to be viewed in a much wider context. And there you take into, affected the incredible career that he had in the world of theatre, and also the amount of support and the way in which he championed and was an ambassador for the city and so many causes that were close to his heart. He's a lad who grew up in Wavertree and went on to become one of the leading lights in the world of theatre, and that's a phenomenal achievement that's set apart from everything. Obviously, allows him the platform to go into Everton, at a boardroom level, but he had a significant career there as well. And I think when you look at the way in which he used the club as a vehicle to try and drive change and support change, of course, is obviously everybody will have seen reference to his speech at the Hillsborough Memorial. We know obviously about his support for that cause, and then so many others as well, for the families of Reece Jones, and even beyond the city as well. And I think that's something that has come out a lot more detail over the past few days. The number of courses that he put his time, energy, and money towards, and did it often privately, in a way that wasn't designed to get external credit. It's only really now that we're starting to see the true extent of that. But it's clear that it's clear that he was a man who cared deeply for other people and never really lost his roots. And whilst clearly been a lot of focus on Everton over the past 18 months, in particular some of the decisions that have been made at board level and the decisions that were made long before then that have got Everton in the situation where they are now, I don't think anyone, certainly we certainly haven't ever suggested that any decisions have been made without the best intentions. And I think that's also worth bearing in mind. But it's clear that from every perspective, he was a man that's obviously deeply passionate about Everton, deeply passionate about the city of Liverpool, and using the privilege that he acquired through his own hard work to help people.
Matt, obviously, it seemed quite fitting and quite, weird in a way, I suppose, that Everton's first game after Bill Kenwright's passing is against David Moyes' West Ham, and a manager who I think, will always be, kind of closely connected and closely kind of close affinity, I think, with Bill Kenwright. Obviously, he was at Everton for a long time, and it's quite fitting, isn't it, that Everton were against David Moyes, a man who was, so much part of the Bill Kenwright tenure at Everton on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and I think Moyes himself said this week, didn't he, that the two of them forged a pretty, this is verbatim, but a fearsome duo. And even at that time, you think back to it, and while we look back at it now, and they feel like halcyon days for Everton. At the time there was criticism of Kenwright, there was criticism of David Moyes at that time as well at various times, but it always felt very much like they had each other's back in that sense, and one could rely on the other to sort of always be there, and that was probably the bedrock of what was such a strong era and profitable era for Everton at that point. So yeah, I suppose it is fitting in a way, and just to echo what Joe said there, my overriding memory of Bill Kenwright, I'm not necessarily someone who I've met or know personally or know too much about, but my granddad and my uncle go to the Hillsborough Memorial, and they were there in 1989, and I went for a spell where I used to go to that memorial with them every year, and I was there in 2013 when Bill stood and spoke, and it was amazing. It's one of those moments that you just don't forget. It's sort of etched into my consciousness how I felt and felt and how what my senses were like, and how the the exact words and the terminology and the tone in which he delivered it. I think it was not only a very poignant and passionate speech, but I think it's incredibly brave to get up there as the chairman of Everton in any circumstances at Anfield in front of a full cop and speak about something like that. And I think the fact that he did it so well, the way in which it was received, particularly by, you see Margaret Aspinall whenever she saw Bill or heard him speak about stuff like that, the smile and the way in which she beamed at him, I think said a lot about what he did for those families, and the way in which he represented himself and the way in which he made sure that Everton were always intertwined in the fight for justice and everything that came after as well. So I think that was Bill Kenwright at his best for me. And he was a fantastic ambassador for the Hillsborough families, fantastic ambassador for Everton, and a fantastic ambassador for the city on that day.
And for anyone who, like I say, hasn't listened to it, myself and Chris Beesley did record a Bill Kenwright Royal Blue podcast special on Wednesday, in which we look back on the life of the Everton chairman and his legacy, both at the football club and the city of Merseyside. Chris, obviously looking ahead now to Sunday, Everton are back in Premier League action when they make the trip to the capital to take on West Ham United. And it's a big game for Sean Dyche's side after last weekend's 2-0 defeat to Liverpool at Anfield.
Yeah, we say it every week, don't we? Because it is. Because, when every point is valuable, and we'll come on to that. Of course, it also is an added point in season that it was this corresponding fixture last season, when the last time that the Everton board did gather en masse, Farhad Moshiri attending his first fixture since the 5-2 capitulation to Watford in October 2021. See, Chairman Bill Kenwright was there, Kevin Fowler was there, Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Graham Sharp, they were all there to oversee what proved to be the final game of Frank Lampard's tenure. Almost like to sort of give it some justification from the owner that when the axe did swing, that he'd actually seen one game under Lampard. So yeah, it was, and I do recall that day when Joe and I were down there, West Ham United were playing their own sort of emotional tributes to David Gold. It's something we touched on during the week. If Bill Kenwright was the last of his kind in terms of being, the homegrown local lad, a supporter, come owner, come chairman, that probably David Gold was the penultimate one in that respect. But yeah, looking forward to this weekend. Of course, it was always going to be an important fixture. But the fact that Everton played well for points at Anfield and were unfortunate in many respects, the fact that they came away empty-handed again means that this is another crucial fixture in terms of picking up Premier League points, like we say, against David Moyes' West Ham United, who just, sort of tells you all you need to know, doesn't it? And he's got them into Europe again on the back of them winning get this title right. It's changed since then, the UEFA Europa Conference League last season. They're now in the Europa League again, and I'm just coming back from their game at Olympiacos, where Everton are just trying to keep their heads above water.
Joe, it's an interesting one Sunday, isn't it? Because obviously Everton played well for large parts of last weekend at Anfield, and before that, played really well against Bournemouth when they, tore them to shreds. And I'm sure they won by more than 3-0, for being honest. But I wrote this after Bournemouth, and we're almost at the point now where Everton need to start winning games when they don't really need to win games, if that makes sense. It feels like every time they desperately need to win, they find a way to win. But it's in between now where they need to start picking up points and picking up victories that will prevent them being in positions where they need to win games.
Yeah, it's a legacy at the start of the season, to be honest, those results against the likes of Wolves, Fulham, and what increasingly looks like a poor point, a missed opportunity at Sheffield United. And then, of course, you then extend that onto Luton Town. Everton had, with the fixture list available to them, they had an opportunity for a head start and they didn't take it. And the problem that they've got now is, whilst there has been the sporadic good performance that's led to a good result, like Brentford, like Bournemouth, however good some of the other performances have been, ultimately they haven't yielded enough points for Everton to climb significantly away from safety. And that's, it's against that backdrop that decision not to send Konate off last week was so significant, because Everton are at a point at the moment where every single point that they can get has, profound value to their season. And, obviously the aftermath of that match has been overshadowed by, the news about Mr. Kenwright. But yeah, it was a real, it's a real frustration that Everton, they deserved the chance to play that, go into the last half an hour of that game on a level playing field. Liverpool hadn't looked like scoring against 11 men, against 10 men. It wouldn't have been harder for Everton to have kept them out, had Canate got sent off. And the problem is, it just means that when you don't get those results, the pressure builds and builds and builds. And, you're looking at this game against West Ham, you're looking at the game against Brighton at home, which also comes before the next international break. And Everton could really do with taking some points from them. Certainly, if they could get a couple of draws, that would be a big help. Because again, you look at December, and I know we're not in November yet, but December is a very, very difficult month. And we saw the fixture changes that came out for TV yesterday. Some of those only make it worse. Given the time.
Newcastle on a Thursday again.
Given the time and some of those kickoffs and the nature of some of those away games. And I think that at the minute, Everton are helped because Burnley and Bournemouth in particular are really, really struggling. Again, last week, the kind of the light at the end of the tunnel for Everton after that Derby Day defeat was the fact that both of those sides lost games where you think that they would be targeting for points. But that run of form for those clubs is only going to continue for so long before something changes. Either they're going to get their houses in order and start picking up points, in which case Everton have to be alive to that. Or, and certainly in the case of Bournemouth, it feels like those managers are really running out of time. And they might, the next international break coming up would be an obvious time. Give a new manager 6 weeks or so before the January transfer window to have a reshuffle and get a new face in, and then that might spark an improvement. So what Everton need to do is they need to stay ahead of the situation as much as they can. And unfortunately, the way in which the season's transpired, that's going to mean getting some big results over the next 6 weeks, next 10 weeks, looking ahead towards the Christmas schedule. And some of those are going to have to come against teams where you don't expect it. West Ham and Brighton are two opportunities coming up. Obviously, with West Ham, as difficult as it will be, the one positive I can take from going into Sunday's game is obviously they've just come back from Greece, where they've had a defeat in a difficult game. And one thing that Everton do tend to do is they try to do this less effectively on Saturday is they start aggressively, they start quick. And we saw this at Brentford, we saw it against Bournemouth, we saw it a few times last season against Brentford again, and away at Brighton. Particularly the Brighton game, they can make life very difficult for better teams if those teams aren't on it straight from the beginning. And if there's any fatigue or complacency within that West Ham start on Sunday afternoon, then Everton could be in a position to take advantage. And the same goes with Brighton, who are also in European action the week after. And like Everton, will have probably played a Carabao Cup game. I can't remember if Brighton have been knocked out of that or not. So Everton really have to go into these games with no fear, and they have to go into these games knowing start hard and see where that takes them, because the sad reality is, such as the nature of the ambitions of the sides that they're coming up against in the coming weeks, that Everton could play very, very well in both games and lose. And if they were to lose both, it's hard to see how the likes of Burnley, Bournemouth, Luton, someone will start to make ground. But I mean, then that'll make for a very uncomfortable next international break. And we all enjoyed, I think, the comfort of the last fortnight, having come off the back of that Bournemouth win, and it was felt like, all right, problems aren't solved, but felt like I could sleep for 10 days. So I'd like to be able to sleep, in 2.5 weeks' time, and the next international break comes around.
Was that the first time you slept for a good 10 days since you took this job covering Everton?
I think I barely slept in about 16 months, to be honest.
Can't say it's not been eventful, can you?
Absolutely not, no.
But Matt, is the big thing on Sunday in the sense of Everton almost got a blueprint of how to play away from home? Like Joe's touched on it there in terms of this season. You see Brentford, Sheffield United, I thought they started really well and should have been probably 2-0 up if Danjuma passes the ball instead of shooting. And obviously last season we've seen them, Forest away, Brighton away. They picked up some valuable points away from home. And it almost feels like Sean Dyche's got a bit of a blueprint in terms of how to get at teams, how to attack teams away from home.
Yeah, it feels like the team's definitely more sure about what they are away from home. I think the Derby was our third defeat in 12 away from home. So like that, that is, I know we drew a lot of those games, and I think we've only won 2 of them. So, But go back a year ago you go back to this time last year when we were playing this exact fixture and the away form. Then it's a lot better. It's a lot more of an improvement, and it does just feel like the way in which Dyche wants to play and the players he's got and the way they're suited to play, and it suits them better. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Sort of looking at the fixture list, it does feel like we've got like a chance in the next week to exercise a couple of big looming demons from last season. That fixture against West Ham last year, I always remember being on the desk before the game, and that video came out of fans speaking to Lampard at the service station beforehand, and the look on Lampard's face, it was, he looked like a ghost. And I think by that point, we all kind of knew the writing was on the wall. And as much as it was being billed, like B said, as Moyes versus Lampard, the loser gets the sack. They'll sack it go. Yeah. For me, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but for me, it just felt like that was a game that Everton were never going to win. Like it just felt like at that point, like they were just going through the motions up until the point where someone made a decision that Lampard had to go, and eventually it came then. And the other one is obviously Brighton, which we'll speak about more later in the week. But I'll never forget that fourth goal at Goodison and the way in which that transpired. That feels like one we need to put right. Bloody hell. But yeah, West Ham, they're interesting, aren't they? Because they started the season really well, and it looked like they're not gonna really miss Declan Rice that much. They seem to make a lot of good signings, but I think they've won one Premier League game since September the 1st, and that was against Sheffield United at home. They've been conceding a lot of goals recently. So yeah, it's not all well and good. And I think that stadium as well, I think, as much as a Sunday 1 o'clock's a bit of a nightmare, and certainly for you guys going down there, I don't envy you. I sort of look at it from a purely pragmatic, everything getting a result point of view. And it feels like quite a good one for us because that stadium's horrendous, isn't it? Let's be honest. The atmosphere in there is I imagine on a great European night for West Ham, the atmosphere is not great because of the way in which the stadium's set up. So on a sleepy Sunday afternoon, move forward an hour than what it would usually be to 1 o'clock anyway because of the Manchester Derby. If Everton can go and do what they did against Brighton, do what they did against Brentford, and get on the front foot and score early, then I imagine there'll be a collective shrug of the shoulders from everyone in claret and blue in there, thinking, oh, God, here we go again. So I think setting the tone is really important, and Everton have been good at doing that. But yeah, I think that the plan is there. But I also look at West Ham and think if they play at the best and they play well, they're kind of like a bit of a better version of what we are at the moment. I think the two managers with similar ethoses, with similar mindsets. And I imagine there'll be times in the game where they're sort of looking at the ball as well, going, no, go on, you have it, you come on to us and we'll counter-attack against you. So feels like one that could be very, very cagey.
I mean, what is quite hard to believe is that both that West Ham game and Brighton game aren't even a year ago. I feel like a lifetime ago, and it's not even been a year.
And Southampton, Connor, don't forget that.
That's it. Well, James Ward-Prowse, of course, who Everton coming up against, scored twice, didn't he, on that Goodison afternoon? So
the most wonderful time of the year.
Well, not unless you're an Everton fan. Well, Chris, Sean Dyche does face a big selection decision on Sunday afternoon. Because obviously Ashley Young sending off Anfield means he will have to make some change or some sort of tweak at right back. Nathan Patterson is obviously the one favourite to come in, given he is a natural right back. But James Garner could also go back to right back, having played there towards the end of last season. Put yourself in Sean Dyche's shoes. What would you be doing?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like you say that the thing, Nathan Patterson is obviously the obvious choice, but then what putting Garner in there does, it allows him to get other people in there, i.e., an interested Gay back in, and that seems to be one who divides Evertonians. I mean, I actually thought that he got it right at the derby, and that I think James Garner deserved his chance to start in the middle again, and if he scored, and again, same with Jack Harrison on the right wing, but it obviously transpired very badly in that. Big part of the problem for Ashley Young was that Harrison just wasn't tracking back and giving him that support. I mean, he wasn't doing a great deal going forwards either. You'd have thought that would be the area where, yet again in a derby match, it's like when we did the goalkeeping situation, that infamous one, was it 2012 in the FA Cup when Brad Jones' third choice was in, and they didn't pepper him with shots or anything. There was, Robertson was missing at left back, and they just didn't get at him. And not only that, Patterson wasn't helping Young in a defensive situation. So, I'd have gone with that same selection at Anfield, but then it messed up. So, I mean, personally, I'd like to see Garner continue in the middle. So for me, Nathan Patterson would be the natural choice. But I just wonder with Sean Dyche, you just think that maybe he'll think that, the things with Patterson, he's good going forward, whereas he needs to improve on his defensive side of his game. I mean, personally, like I said, that would be the choice I'd make. But you can sort of see that in putting, he's talking already this season about how Garner is really helpful for him, and his intelligence to play in these different positions. And you could maybe see that just to say allow like just a Gay to come back in centre mid. It's not the choice that I'd make, but I could see that happening.
Joe, I think it'd be incredibly harsh to put James Garner at right back. Personally, I think he's done enough to warrant to stay in the middle of the park. B says there's the obvious choice to put Nathan Patterson at right back, but if one thing we've learned with Sean Dyche in charge of Everton is don't expect the obvious choices.
Yeah, you said it. I think the obvious choice is that James Garner has moved on to the right side of the pitch. I don't really see a way in which that's avoided, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
So
do you mean right midfield rather than right back?
Midfield or right back, because I think that if Sean Dyche wants to bring in Nathan Patterson at right back, as well and good. He's increasingly experienced in the Premier League. Sean Dyche continually tries to point out his youth, and that's fair enough. But obviously, he's less experienced and more attack minded than Ashley Young is. And so, if Nathan Patterson was to come into the right back, I think that he would need more protection than Jack Harrison was able to give Ashley Young last week. I didn't think Harrison did a huge amount wrong. I thought he worked hard. He was just in a situation where he's coming up against just a very good side and he's chasing his tail a little bit. So the option really is to either move Garner onto the right back to offer Nathan Patterson more protection, or to say, well, Harrison has been largely doing well for Everton. He maintain an attacking threat, and therefore move James Garner right back so that you're not doubly exposed. And I think that what I would probably do is I would move James Garner to right back. I think that probably just need a little bit of a sense of perspective from at the minute. And I think what James Garner has done over the past month, Aston Villa in the Carabao Cup game, Anfield to a certain extent, certainly against Bournemouth, is he's shown that he can do a job in centre midfield. Obviously still young, he's still growing in experience, that needs to be borne in mind. But I think he's won that battle in terms of the long-term perception that says that Sean Dyche now has 4 central midfield options to choose a free from, as opposed to at very much start of the season, he's got 3, and then he's got a James Garner who it will fit in as and when, very good player, but perhaps not with the same experience as some of those others in the midfield. So I think almost with Idrissa Gueye having been on the bench in the vast amount of experience he has, the option that sees the fewest square pegs in round holes sees Idrissa Gueye come back into centre midfield, and then either Jack Harrison stay in right wing where he's also he's natural position, and James Garner at right back, or Patterson on the right and James Garner being on right midfield. I think that Garner, I think there's an argument, certainly in the absence of Seamus Coleman, to suggest that Garner is probably the best right back in that option available to Everton and to Sean Dyche in the absence of the club captain. And I think, it has to probably be a game or a period where we put aside, personal ambitions and loyalty to certain players and their form in certain places, and go, what's better for the team? And I think that what might be better for the team might be James Garner at right back, keep Harrison right midfield so you retain that attacking threat, but you've got a bit of protection behind him, and bring Idrissa Gueye, obviously an established centre midfielder, into the middle of the park. That's probably where I'd go with this. And obviously, West Ham are another side that do enjoy attacking down the wings. So you like it is that they may be coming up against someone like Jared Bowen on this side. So the danger isn't quite as significant as it is with Luis Diaz, but there is still danger down there, and that's why I think a change is inevitable. I think a defensive change is inevitable on that right-hand side, because the idea of having Patterson and Harrison there would just leave that side of the pitch too exposed, I think.
Matt, where are you lying on the right-back conundrum facing Sean Dyche?
Oh, I'm full in on Patterson here. I'm with B. Sorry, Joe. Yeah. If we're not playing him now, when are we going to play him? effectively. You know, you've got a situation that, like, it feels like already with Ashley Young, we've reached the sort of Keane Branthwaite threshold, and like now it's like the Young Patterson threshold, where you've got an experienced player who is not playing well. Like, I think he's been poor, Ashley Young, in the main since he's come in. It feels like teams have been targeting him, and a really good team we played last weekend targeted him, and he got sent off. I think was that his 5th yellow card of the season now.
So he would have been suspended anyway, even if he hadn't got the second yellow. So
he's clearly fallible. You know, he can't really get up and down the pitch anymore. I don't think his defensive instincts are great anyway, because he's effectively a winger that's been moved back there. So I'm sort of reached the point now where it's like, who would you rather play there? A fallible 38-year-old player or a fallible 23-year-old player who could learn and develop and grow? Like, it feels like as footballers now, there's not loads between them. So I prefer to play Patterson in that sense. And yeah, it's just one of them. It feels like if we're not going to play Patterson now at the weekend with Young suspended, Coleman injured, like when's this lad going to get a game? You know, from Everton's perspective, and there's £12 million we spent on him. It's a significant amount of money for Everton to spend on a player. It's certainly in the current landscape of what's going on at the moment. And I just don't think it sent out the right message. And I mean, I've heard a lot of people say about James Garner right back, but are we sure he can play right back? I don't think he's ever played right back for Everton. He's played as a right wing back, which I think is a completely different position. And when I watched the England under-21s in the summer, he was a right back in the same mould that Trent Alexander-Arnold plays right back for Liverpool now, where it's pushing into midfield and getting the ball as sort of another central midfielder. It's not, being close to your centre-back tight in. It's not defending one-on-one against the winger, because in that tournament, England had loads of the ball. I think playing right back for Everton is completely different to playing right back for England under 21s under Lee Carsley. It will be about defending. It will be about communication. It will be about trying to stop Jarrett Bowen as opposed to getting into midfield and getting forward and using that ability on the ball. And it would just feel a bit counterproductive to me to have Garner and to have him finally in his best position, finally playing well, contributing with goals, contributing with assists, sort of burgeoning as like the main man in that area of the pitch. And then we lose one player and all of a sudden you're shifting him out to right back again and bringing Idrissa Gueye in there, when I think the balance in midfield has actually looked pretty good with him and Onana after a ropey start to that partnership against Doncaster in the Cup. So it would just feel counterproductive for me. I don't think it sent out a great message to Nathan Patterson. But listen, I don't know what Sean Dyche is thinking. He might look at Nathan Patterson and think, I don't fancy you at all. I don't think you're capable of going to West Ham and dealing with Jarrett Bowen, like you said before, Joe. But we keep reverting back to that Brighton game and the blueprint that day, and how Everton got that 5-1 win. And Patterson played up against Mitoma that day, didn't he? And did a great job and shut him down. And I think one of the frustrations for me last weekend in playing Ashley Young ahead of Patterson was that Patterson ironically did a great job on Diaz, didn't he? In that 0-0 derby at the start of last season. He shut him down really well and was man of the match that day. And he was sat on the bench while Ashley Young was chasing his tail. So I think now is the time for Patterson. He's fit. No other right backs are available. Just give him time. Give him time and chance to make mistakes and time to develop. And hopefully, further down the line, we'll see a better footballer. Is
there, Joe, a possibility that Everton might play 3 centre backs and bring Michael? I know Michael Keane obviously gave away a penalty, but bring Michael Keane in and go, with a 5/3 at the back, and Sean Dyche might just think stay tight and keep it locked in almost.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a possibility of that, and yeah, that solves some of the problems if Nathan Patterson plays a right wing back. Obviously, got more protection around him because he's got a third centre back, and if it means bringing James Garner into that position, well, as Matt said there, it's a position he played against Bournemouth and did very well in that game. So I think there is a real, I don't think Sean Dyche will be too fussed by Michael Keane giving away that penalty. I think he is a player that retained Dyche's trust, having worked with him for so long during the course of his career. And so it's definitely a possibility. Like I say, I think with the right back situation, if he remains 4 at the back, I think it's a slightly more complex scenario. And just saying Patterson's the best option next, I think you have to think about what's going to go in front of him. And I think Patterson and Harrison, whilst it would feel quite attacking, and that would feel dangerous, I think, given what we saw last week. So it's, as I say, I think it's probably less a decision to be made on. I think James Garner has already proven to people and taken a big step towards, in a fully fit side, fully available side, he's in that centre midfield. But I wouldn't be surprised if Dyche moves him to the right, either as protection for Patterson or to sit at right back and perhaps be a bit more conservative, but then to also offer his delivery from deep, which hasn't been great when he's kind of played in that role for Everton, or he's sat further back. But I think he has a far greater potential to kind of deliver for Dominic Calvert-Lewin from a deeper position than perhaps Patterson does. So.
Chris, there was some big claims made earlier this week, I think it's safe to say, by the Daily Telegraph, who said that Everton could face a 12-point deduction if they are found guilty in the latest hearing with the Premier League over financial fair play. Not ideal timing by any means. Obviously, the hearing got underway last week.
Yeah.
It was quite the bold claim, was to say that Everton could be deducted 12 points. They're not even on 12 points as things stand.
Yeah. And it must be stressed. I mean, I was very disappointed a lot of the way other outlets were reporting this. It's been a bit of a carte blanche to say, almost like that decision has been made, and where would Everton be with, and various stuff. And there's been some sort of inaccurate reports about Everton's spending. It's been very dangerous, but yeah, it's not a good position to be in. But we're stressed, like we said, and we're basing our reports on information obtained by Joe. Obviously, we did the piece there with the joint byline. Joe can speak when it's his turn, when you'll ask him in a moment. But it was just the Premier League history. Portsmouth are the only team, correct me if I'm wrong, to have actually had a points deduction for a
Middlesbrough got one as well.
Yeah, I was going to say for a non-football decision. I think Middlesbrough, they refused to play a game. I think that they had like some injury crisis or something, and they pulled out. So yeah, from a non-footballing perspective, it's only been Portsmouth, and that was for actually entering administration that season, and they got docked 10 points, and they would have finished bottom of the table anyway. So this is very much a worst-case scenario. It's not the Premier League who are deciding this; it's the independent panel. That's the whole thing. That seems to be everything that our understanding. Any sort of decision here in terms of the length of how long the case will take, and how it will be structured, and the ultimate decision in the fact how if Everton, of course, are found guilty on their one charge, is the independent panel. So maybe there's a bit of brinkmanship going on here. I don't know. Or the Premier League wants to send out a certain letter, sort of a certain message. Matt's spoken about that. If you want to ask him next about what he thinks might be going on here. But yeah, the headline, of course, 12 points. But when you actually even read what the Daily Telegraph was saying, they were saying that a maximum punishment of up to 12 points. So that's the absolute worst case scenario if Everton are found guilty. And I think, it's not a good position to be in, even being, up against this. But got to have a bit of perspective here about where Everton stand. And of course, Everton have always been adamant that they were going to fight their corner vehemently, and they don't think they've actually done anything wrong. So yeah, there's also obviously the option for to appeal once if the decision does go against them. So it could run this one. But yeah, I'm more concerned about the way that, like I said, that other outlets have reported. It's almost like, they're going to lose 12 points, and that's on the horizon. That's a very sort of dangerous game to play.
Matt, Sean Dyche talks a lot about, lowering the noise and, a lot of noise around the club. But that noise with stories like this is only going to grow and get bigger and bigger.
Oh yeah, and it's been a great headline, hasn't it, for a lot of places that are reporting this without the same sort of nuance that Chris and Joe and yourself has this week, certainly, yeah. But I think it's just important to stay calm at this, isn't it? Just to echo what B said there, as much as the Premier League could recommend a 30-40 point deduction, but ultimately it's not up to them, is it? It's up to the independent panel. I just found that the timing of it all really strange this week, if not a little bit disrespectful, certainly, given what's happened. The tragic news Everton about this week, and the time when this story came out, it sort of left a bit of a bitter taste. But And listen, obviously this is very speculative on my part as well, but I just wonder if this is the Premier League sort of getting their message out there now, in a sense that they can say to all the clubs that have been complaining about Everton, they can point at this and go, well, look, we wanted this, we wanted a 12-point deduction. Don't come at us, don't kick off at us. You know, this we wanted a strong punishment, but it's just frustrating, isn't it? That we've got to sit and wait and see now, effectively for. God, we haven't even got an effect like a deadline, have we, or a date where it's definitely going to be confirmed? And I don't know. I just want to throw this out to you guys. Just something I was thinking about with when Bees was speaking there. Like, say if the worst thing was to happen and Everton were to get a 12-point deduction, like, what would that mean in terms of like games this week? And like, obviously we're sat here now in limbo, and we don't know what it's going to be. So in one context, a point for Everton would be a great result this weekend, wouldn't it? And we'd be happy to come away from the London Stadium with a draw. But if we knew we were getting a 12-point deduction, all of a sudden it'd be, well, we're going to have to go for this a bit more and be a bit more attacking and be a bit more on the front foot. Like this sort of limbo and, you know, panel purgatory, if you will, that we're in at the moment is not really helping us, because if Everton are going to get a points deduction, you'd rather know as soon as possible so we can go about trying to make up that ground as opposed to just sitting and waiting 1 year. It's a bit of a weird situation to be in.
Well, there seems to be no sort of, because it's unprecedented as well, and the power is with the panel, about when these points would even, if Everton are found guilty, if there is a points deduction, when that would even take place. Is it retrospective? Because this is talking about something that happened in season 21-22. Is it the current season? Is it a future season? I mean, we don't even know answers to that at this particular stage.
I think it's worth pointing out, well, Joe, obviously, two sentences that Chris said there about if, and what matters there and staying calm is the right thing to do, because at the minute, no one knows. It's unprecedented, and you followed this extensively and you know, done a lot of groundwork into what's going on, and there's not a lot clear, is in terms of what's going on and where things stand. But what's worth noting is that until the independent commission deliver their verdict, everything is possible, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that is fair. Everything is possible. And also, I think that because no one really knows what the allegation is in the full detail, I mean, there's been some speculation, but no one really knows. And even if we did know, we probably, only unless you've got forensic insight into Everton's accounts and the conversations that they had with the Premier League and around the time, and any guidance they might have been given, we know they work very closely. Without knowing that, it's difficult to say, how bad it is. Is it an accusation of they've stepped over the line in a grey area, or are they being accused of doing something incredibly egregious? Obviously, the club deny everything. But I think the most important thing at the minute is probably just to take a little step back and unravel even what the Telegraph said, to be honest, because, it was very much a case of recommend up to 12 points. Well, there are another number of caveats in that. First and foremost, the commission, not the Premier League, have got to decide whether or not Everton are guilty of any wrongdoing. So, that is a case that they have heard the evidence and now deliberating on the verdict for, but they've still got to decide that Everton have done something wrong before they even get to that stage. And then the next step is obviously Premier League, the wording is up to 12 points, up to 12 point, starts at 1 and ends at 12. So I mean, there could be, and you see this in most adversarial processes. You see this in the courtroom quite often. When you get to the end of the case and someone's up to being sentenced, it will quite often be that the prosecution will set out what the maximum can be, and then the defence will set out their mitigating circumstances and go for the most minimum. And the judge will then weigh everything up and come down somewhere in between. So a lot's got to happen before Everton even get to a points deduction in the first place, and I think that's worth bearing in mind. I do think that this has been problematic, the way in which this information and these claims have come out this week. Timing isn't particularly great, particularly as the Premier League, bearing in mind that they lodged the allegation against Everton in the first place. They're the group of people that have known the ins and outs of this case for 7 months now, probably obviously a lot longer before they even decide to pursue it. So it's very likely that they will have known that if their position was Everton should be given a 12 points deduction or up to 12, they will have known that for months now. So for that line if they are briefing that line privately to certain people, if that's come out the day after Bill Kenwright's passing, when it could have come out at any point in the last 5 months, if they want to get that message out, is incredibly problematic for for obvious reasons. And I think that the big problem around this process, I touched on it last week before we knew about all this in my column, and I'll do similar again, I think probably for Saturday's column as well, is because there's such little information about this process. We don't know the allegation. There's no precedent, so we've got no kind of time frame or no guidelines for which we can judge our own expectations from this. But because there's such little information out there, it leaves a vacuum for speculation, and that's also problematic. And I think the integrity of the Premier League is also on the line here in relation to this. Obviously, that of Everton's is, but certainly the Premier League's is as well. And one thing that we can't allow for this situation to become is a PR or a political or an optical stunt for the Premier League, where they're trying to say, oh, look, we don't need an independent regulator in the top flight of the national game because we've got everything in order. Well, they can't really be seen. They shouldn't be trying to make an example of Everton. They should be submitting the information that they've got, and they should be leaving it to what is supposedly an independent panel to judge upon that information and then come up with a fitting punishment if they get to a point where they believe that the wrongdoing is needed. And something like up to 12 points. That would be a huge punishment for a start, and crucial to anything that comes out of this, and it hasn't been the case so far, is transparency and openness, because the Premier League are going to have to come out and explain what it is that they should come out and say, what the allegation is, to a certain extent what the arguments were and what the thought process is in any decision-making process and in any decision-making process over the sanction if one's deemed necessary. Otherwise, the process won't have any integrity whatsoever. And I think we're in a period at the moment where the reputation of the Premier League is only heading in a downward trajectory, whether you look at something like this or whether you look at some of the recent takeovers that we've had in the game, whether you go down to, I know it's slightly separate, but you go to some of the refereeing decisions and state of VAR and the way that's impacting. So you look at the fixture list and the way the games are being moved at such short notice. Obviously, the Arsenal one for Everton, but you look at the announcements this week of a Christmas Eve game, which just feels absolutely, sacrilegious. And what we need to be alive to, and I think asking questions about, is making sure that Everton aren't being seen as a vehicle through which the Premier League can try and make some case to say it's got its own house in order at any cost. Everton can't be the scapegoat, the excuse, the martyr for the Premier League to be making its case to say that everything's okay, because that's obviously problematic. And Everton's fate lies in the hands of the Premier League to some extent over a number of issues. Obviously, technically, they don't oversee now this process in relation to the tribunal. It's the commission that decide on it, any wrongdoing and any punishment if necessary. But obviously, it's a process inspired by the Premier League. But also, we've also got the fit and proper owners test that they'll be overseen in relation to 777. And this is a time really that Everton fans more than ever need the Premier League to, yes, be robust, but also to be fair. And the less information there is about any of this, the more room there will be for speculation over the integrity and the ambitions of the Premier League and where Everton fit within them.
No, I think that's spot on, Joe, and it's one that we'll be closely following over the coming weeks and months, because I think there's going to be lots of more.
And it could be weeks and it could be months, because I've asked a question and they say, if they, I go, well, is there any time frame decision? They say, well, the commission decides. So that's it. I've asked whether or not any punishment would be put into place for this season in which the verdict's delivered in. They say, well, the commission will decide. I don't think it'd be retrospective, because that would be a nonsense. But and I think that the position it gets for the integrity of the process, it would feel like it would probably have to come in this season. But again, unless we have any insight really into how these decisions are being made, we've got no idea, no chance of understanding them. So,
Joe, I'll stick with you because you wrote this morning on Friday morning as we speak that Doucoure is closing on and signing a new contract at the club. Obviously, a player who I think it's safe to say was a bit of a rebirth after Sean Dyche arrived after being frozen out by Frank Lampard. But I think just rewards for a series of impressive displays towards the end of last season and the start of this season.
Yeah, it's a remarkable transformation. Obviously frozen out of Frank Lampard's side after the pair had a breakdown in their relationship. And, I think he's someone that most people probably, with his contract having initially been due to expire last season, last summer, I think that even by the beginning of last season, I think there was probably a sense that he would probably have gone in the summer. A big contract, an aging player, and one whose impact at the club wasn't clear either way how you would judge him at that point. I remember sitting down with him in Washington during the pre-season tour ahead of last season and being struck really by how well he spoke about his love for the club and how he came out and said, I want a new contract. I want to be at Everton for the long-term future. And I believed him when he said that. And I'm quite pleased for him in the fact that it felt like at that time he was probably partially saying that because it wasn't clear what other option there would be. But he definitely warrants that now. He was him and it's an argument between him and Dwight McNeil to say who was the most valuable player under Sean Dyche in keeping Everton up last season. You remember his early goal against Brighton, obviously one of the biggest moments of last season. We all remember his stunner against Bournemouth as well. He's already a person that is in Everton folklore, perhaps not an icon or a legend or anything like that, but he's sealed.
As cemented. Called, he definitely can't be a legend.
No.
Coleman doesn't class himself.
He cemented his place in Everton folklore, whatever happens. And interestingly, to a certain extent, he's continued that form this season. He scored 3 goals in 9 games already from a centre midfield and the side that is creating more chances, but still finds it difficult to hit the back of the net. So, I think it's a sensible decision. I don't know the ins and outs in terms of whether or not there might be a reduction of his pay because it is significant. I'd hope that Everton are at least trying to look at that. I think it's also indicative of just where Everton are at the moment as well. The reality is that it would cost Everton far more money to try and effort to find a player to replace him who would have anywhere near the same impact as him than it would to keep him at the moment. And I think that's important to bear in mind when you look ahead to next summer when his current deal is out, it runs out, because Everton have a significant number of players who will be out of contract, and trying to firm up some of the position of some of those players who are known quantities is the safest route for Everton to go down financially and logistically. So I think it makes sense in a number of ways. And then we spoke there about the potential point deduction for Everton. Well, another potential punishment would be a transfer embargo or transfer ban. To some extent, obviously not in 12, but that would be a profoundly significant punishment for Everton next summer, given the amount of players that they would have left in their squad after contracts expire. So, getting the house in order with a couple of players like this makes a huge amount of sense, I think, at the moment. I think he's probably a player that I think we've all been surprised by the extent of his impact and the continued positive impact that he's had. I think he's probably a player that I think if the club were in a better state, you'd probably say, well, 30, maybe go into 31, 32, 33 by his contracts, big wages, even if they are reduced. A player who, whilst extremely effective, can only really play in one way. I think he's probably a player that, as you look to progress up the league, you maybe look at saying, well, is there a better option there? Yeah. But Everton can't do that at the moment. I think he's, within his performances on the pitch this year so far, he merits it. But then I also think there are a lot of other reasons why this is a sensible move for Everton.
You with Joe, do you think it's a sensible decision to give Abdullahi a new contract?
Yeah, I'd let Joe's outline those reasons why that. He certainly has been, as Joe said, a player been reborn under Dyche after, the bizarre way things finished for him under Frank Lampard. He claims, I don't know, only he knows what really went on, but he says he didn't understand what went wrong there. And
I think we've all spoken to a varying point at which he's basically denied that he'd done anything to ever upset Frank Lampard.
Maybe he's keeping his counsel on that one. But whatever happened there under the current manager, he had a much bigger impact. Certainly, like I said, those tangible factors of goals, which is so important from that area. The way he's able to pop up on a regular basis for somebody in his position. So it makes sense, doesn't it? Tying down, it's good to have somebody like that one, established Premier League player, happy to commit his future to the club.
Matt, do you think this is again a bit of a clear example of Kevin Felwell being a bit forward thinking, a bit looking at the bigger picture, and you think, well, we can't really afford to lose someone like of his experience who can still do a job at such an uncertain time, as Joe alluded to.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, actually. Maybe it's just more like an opportunistic thing where they just sort of had a chat and gone, "We're happy with you. Are you happy with us? Yeah, let's just sort it then." Like, I don't know, like, I don't think, that both lads have said that. I don't think he's going to be like a long-term plan by any means. Doucoure, what is he now? Is he 30 now, I think, or 31? Yeah, so, he's going to be around for probably another, 2-3 years at his peak. So, I don't know, maybe it is long-term plan, maybe it's just opportunistic, but I just think he's a really funny player, like in terms of like being quite peculiar and sometimes actually just quite funny as well. Like I love how like when he scores, like he does like 4 or 5 different celebrations at the same time. Like he'll kiss the badge, he'll pull his shirt up, he'll do a knee slide. Like he can't quite settle on one defined celebration. Like I always remember at the end of last season when the final whistle blew and it cut to Doucoure, and he goes to take his top off and then decides not to do it and then does something else. It's like, but he's the classic, to use a cliche, he's the classic too much time player, isn't he? I think he's a player that when he plays on instinct and when he does things one touch and quickly, he can be really effective. But you think back to that opening game of the season where he's running through on goal against Fulham and he can square it one way or take the shot himself, and you can almost see the gears churning in his head, and the longer it goes, the more unlikely it is for him to make the right decision. But no, he's an effective player, isn't he? Somebody who works really hard in this setup. I think we saw at the end of last season when he was out the side how important he is to the way in which Sean Dyche wants to play, and has scored loads of big goals for us. Certainly away from, obviously one big one at home, but loads away from home as well. He's chipped in with. So no real issues for me. And I suppose the other sort of comforting thing as well, of all the doom and gloom around finances and talk about impending doom and all that sort of stuff, is that I'm not sure Everton would have committed another year to a player who's going to be on close to £100,000 a week. Would you say he'd be on now, Doucoure, on that contract, if they were really worried to the extent of tends to talk of like administration, that sort of stuff? Would Everton be offering that kind of deal? I don't think they would. So that in itself as another added layer is sort of encouraging too, I think.
Yeah, I think another layer to that as well is going back a couple of weeks to Jarrad Branthwaite deal as well. Jarrad Branthwaite is someone that was already on a long-term contract with Everton, and as much as they might have wanted to secure him psychologically and give him the boost to say that he's wanted and pleased with how he started, he signed a new contract. It's hard to imagine there wouldn't have been a pay rise within that, and that was something that didn't need to be done. They still had, I think he had 2 more years plus an option of a third on his contract even before the new one done. So it's not as if any club would have been in a particularly decent position if they wanted to come in. Everyone still would have had the cards if someone had come in for him in January. So,
right, gents, I think before we finish, it's predictions time. Obviously, Chris Beesley hit the nail on the head last week with his Anfield prediction for all the wrong reasons. I think it should be added. But Bees, I'll come to you to start with then. What are you going to London Stadium?
Well, me and you going down there, Connor. Hopefully, it's going to be better than my last couple of visits there under Frank Lampard. I'd say, like we said, as Matt alluded to, a point would be welcome, and I'll go for 1-1.
1-1. Matt Jones.
Do you know what? I've quite enjoyed being indignant about referees all week. And like we've done this sometimes after derbies where we've had positives to take from it, and then we go into the next game and just let any momentum slip away, really. But I fancy us on Sunday. I think West Ham have been under the radar, struggling. They've had that game in midweek, and I think away from home will suit us. So I'll go for a 2-1 win for the Blues.
You want Joe Thomas?
Yeah, I'm going 2-0 to Everton.
2-0.
I'm going for a fast, hard start against fatigue, complacent West Ham. James Garner sitting in at right back, supplying balls into the channel for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and the game plan working.
Well, you've stolen my thunder because I was also going to go 2-0 Everton. So it's not often we get a full house, I think, of positive results, because I think people would still take a 1-1 draw if that comes as well. But no, thank you very much for listening to today's Road Blue podcast. We will, of course, be back on Monday to dissect everything that happens at the London Stadium. But for today, thank you very much for joining us.